Go. Hello, I'm Jose Raimundo, and my topic I will be addressing today is how the democracy in the United States has failed to serve its people. The structure of a nation depends on the efficiency and effectiveness of its government. Throughout history, empires have been created and have crumbled. The lifespan of a community or an empire depends on its government. For the government holds the power, the people together under one supreme law. The topic I will address today is in regard of the democratic form of government that has failed to properly serve its people today. My main points are unequal representation, the imperial-like presidential power, and the power that the judiciary branch possesses. First of all, we are not equally represented within this type of government. We have a winner-take-all type of election when it comes to the presidential election. For example, if you are from California and voted for the Republican Party, your vote would be diminished and not be accounted for because California is such a strong democratic state. This means if 49% of California voted for the Republican Party and 51% of California voted for the Democratic Party, 49% Republican, 51% Democratic, this would mean that all of California's 55 electoral votes would go to the Democratic Party and the 49% would not be accounted for. There are also other reasons to why I believe that this is not an equal representation. And this is because of the taxation without representation in some districts. Districts such as the District of Columbia, which is taxed by the federal state, however, they have no representation to fight for them. Overseas citizens have no voting rights, but they have to file taxes to the American government. Another reason is that the Senate fails to represent its people. In order to get anything done in the Senate, you need a 2/3 majority vote. But like smaller states such as Wyoming, do they have like more power in this? Because California has 38 million people and Wyoming has 600,000 people, but both have 2 senators each. Therefore, states such as Wyoming, Rhode Island, and Iowa, who have a combined population of 4.5 million people, have more power than the 38 million people of California. Another reason in this unequal representation is the number of seats in the House of Representatives. The number of seats within the House is currently 435, but this hasn't changed since 1911, back when the population was only 94 million. But according to the United States Census, today we have 314 million people, so therefore we are unequally represented as compared to back then. My next point is the imperial-like power of the presidency. The power of the president has often fluctuated during the history of the United States. However, it is gradually rising. The War Power Act of 1973 states that the president is allowed to send military force abroad only when it is approved by Congress. However, many presidents have broken this rule. According to Alan Greenblatt, an author for the National People Radio, President Obama is in violation of this act, and Congress have been persuading him and voted to stop him, but to no avail. There have been multiple presidents that have done unconstitutional acts such as George Bush's invasion of Panama, Clinton's bombing of Syria, and when Reagan gave weapons to Iran-Contra, even though Congress just passed a law stating that you're not allowed to finance these terrorists. My final point is the power of the judiciary branch. Throughout American history, the number of seats within the Supreme Court has fluctuated due to the situation of the nation. Furthermore, the Supreme Court judges have lifelong terms. This may not seem detrimental to our institution, but generations change, and the citizens should have someone that represents their current generation, not someone else's generation 30 years ago. And finally, the Supreme Court has no criteria for selection. According to the Constitution, the judges, both of the Supreme and the inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall continue. Hold up. The judges, both of the Supreme Court and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. So basically, you just have to be in good behavior to stay within office if you're a Supreme Court judge. This leaves the criteria for staying in office to much interpretation. Does that mean that the Supreme Court judges must be just and fair? Or does that mean that they won't violate any crimes to stay? In conclusion, the democratic institution of the United States of America has failed to properly serve its people due to the unequal representation and the overpower of certain governmental branches. I was trying to read but I was ready and I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna die. And then like, I'm up there and I'm like, 1 minute, I'm like, oh my god.
Free line, she's going.
I know. Okay.
All right, you state the proposition at the beginning, although you stated you're going to talk to us about how this is the case, which almost makes it sound like a question, and it really is, it comes across as an informative speech. I think you want a stronger declarative statement there. I thought you had a pretty good preview of what the supporting points were going to be. You rushed through them a little bit. When you get to that first point, it basically is just a listing of various ideas about how the government power is distributed. Like you mentioned the Electoral College, you talked about the representation in the House of Representatives, but there's not really any discussion about what consequences there are to any of these sorts of things. For instance, you make a claim that says you have to have 2/3 of a majority in the Senate. There's no data on that that says that that's the case, and there's no example of anything that is a problem because of that, if that were in fact the case. And there's also not a discussion of what the function of the giving the states powers as opposed to just giving it to individual people. So there's a context that's missing in the argument also. Let me see. On the presidential powers issue, on the second point, you just list a whole bunch of cases, and I'm not exactly sure that they all fall outside of the purview of what you're talking about. The one place that we get a source citation in the speech is in this section, and the source citation is the National People's Radio, and I don't know what that is, but it sure sounds a little vague when it comes to the examples. Like I said, it mentions the examples. Were any of these things challenged? If they are unconstitutional, then anybody would have the ability to challenge them in the courts, and I'm wondering, were there in fact challenges to presidential power in those situations? Have the presidents ignored, like you said, the 1973 War Powers Act, and have the courts ruled on those things? There's no explanation about why courts should be representing generations of people. I still don't understand that concept, why that's relevant to what the function of the court is, and that you need to have an explanation of that. All right, thank you.